Hello, today is Thursday, January 14th, 2021. I'm Joe Schmidt from TC2, and this is Staying Connected. On today's podcast, we are kicking off our series on trends to watch in 2021. And in this episode, we are going to take a look at how the market for managed network services is undergoing some significant changes. I have Ben Fox with me, one of TC2's managing directors. And Ben is going to share some of his recent experience buying and negotiating global managed services deals, and he has done quite a few. Ben, thanks for joining me. So you've been doing managed services and outsourcing deals for a long time. What would you say are some of the most significant recent developments that you've been seeing?
Hi, Joe. Yes, I think I would say the most significant development that we're seeing right now is an ongoing shift from carrier-led managed services more to system integrator-led managed services. So there's always been a bit of a split between carriers and systems integrators in this space, right from the early days of giant IT outsourcing deals, where often the network was just thrown to the SI along with everything else, versus the carriers extending their scope from circuits and voice into their specific outsourcing sweet spot of managed network services. But really, IT outsourcing has moved on hugely over the years, and sophisticated enterprises target their exact and their customized needs for individual technology towers and are really comfortable integrating multiple managed service providers together. And what we're seeing right now in that environment is that the significantly more productized managed services factory that carriers like to offer is losing out to systems integrators who will build a customized managed services operation that really fits the customer's bespoke needs.
That's very interesting. So how do these differences come out in the deals that you've been working on?
Well, so we're seeing price in particular as a major differentiator in deals at the moment. And it's funny, even though you may think that a standard factory product set from a carrier should be cheaper than a made-to-measure suit, if you will, from an SI, what really happens is that in order to deliver the bespoke requirements that the customer has, the carriers have to add a custom solution wrapper over their productized services, which ends up being expensive. And I'm overgeneralizing, of course, but in particular, some of the India-based SIs, so think Wipro, HCL, TCS, and others, they're particularly aggressive in their pricing, and they present significantly lower price points than many of their competition. So really, this presents a couple of really important opportunities for our clients. First, there are significant savings opportunities right now for enterprises that go to market for their existing managed network services. But also, and secondly, it means that the price of entry for those enterprises that currently manage their network in-house, price of entry to move to third-party provided managed services has dropped substantially. So those services, managed services, are becoming more affordable, and a business case is easier to justify than ever.
So, Ben, back in June, we recorded a podcast and we spoke about automation in managed services deals. Is that still a differentiator?
Great point, Joe. Yes, absolutely. Automation remains a really big differentiator. And as we talked about last year, some providers seem to have a real leg up over their competition when it comes to deploying automation and providing enterprises with the operational and the financial benefits that follow. So we see it as very important to seek out those service providers that clearly regard automation as a foundational building block of the services they provide. And it's got to be said that we continue to see a far greater focus on automation from systems integrators that have a strong heritage in IT service towers, such as service desks, such as PC support, and such as end user services, and where they are now bringing their experience in delivering automation in those domains over to managed network services.
So, Ben, what do you think are some of the key solution and proposal attributes that enterprises would be, wise to focus on when sourcing managed network services?
Good question. And I think one key area is to fully understand the supplier staffing models that their proposals are based on. And we're not necessarily used to doing that in managed network services because historically the carriers are providing a shared resource model. Remember that factory that is supporting multiple customers at once. So you can't isolate the volume of resources providing services to you. But with if you will, a made-to-measure suit from a systems integrator, you should definitely expect to explicitly understand the volume of resources, number of personnel that would be dedicated to performing your managed services, and actually be ready to compare that staffing model across the different providers that you've got proposals from, and indeed provide feedback to the suppliers that potentially either overclubbed or underclubbed the size of the team they'll need. Also, understanding the balance as part of that staffing model, the balance between offshore and onshore resources is also part of that analysis and part of your guidance back to suppliers. Leveraging offshoring is always critical to get to a cost-effective price point for managed services. But there's always you'll likely want some resources closer to or based at your facilities, and getting the balance right is really important. Another key area is tooling. Not just in terms of deploying automation, but the degree to which you want the service provider to bring their tools or use your tools, what tool set the service provider will bring, what access to that tool set they will provide to you, the customer, and indeed the need to integrate your tools with the supplier's tools and vice versa. And a final solution attribute I'd look at carefully is service level commitments. The degree to which the service providers will link a percentage of their fees to meeting a core set of service levels that are customized to your specific pain points and needs, that can be a really distinct differentiator between different proposals.
Thanks, Ben. I bet many ICT professionals and companies, they're probably used to dealing with carriers, certainly for telecom services and perhaps for managed network services. What would you say are some of the key differences when dealing with systems integrators?
Yeah, it's another good question, Joe. Let me cover a couple of big differences. I'll start with commitments. I think we're all familiar with the carrier commitment model, which is typically a commitment to spend a certain amount of money on a specific bundle of services each year or perhaps over the term of contract. But the systems integrators don't really think that way at all. And interestingly, not unusual to ask them, is there a commitment? And they'll reply that there isn't one. But that's not really what they mean. What they really do is they are basing their solution, of course, and their pricing on a certain expectation of volume and therefore a certain expectation of revenue and spend. But the focus is far less on a minimum take or pay spend level that must be met, and more so on what are the consequences of the volume of services increasing and decreasing. And that brings me to another difference, which is the pricing model. So unlike carrier deals, which the SI pricing models tend to be far more one-off and customizable than the carrier factory pricing models, as you might expect. And in particular, pricing that varies with the volume of services is pretty common. So unit rates that perhaps automatically reduce as your volumes grow, but increase as your volumes reduce. And the degree to which those pricing adjustments apply and at what trigger points varies significantly between different deals, and indeed is typically a really important part of the negotiation with the service provider.
Hey, we're about out of time, but how about if you share some of your personal observations on the managed services market?
Sure, Joe, I'm happy to. So I think first, I would say that I think the carriers know that they need to change if they want to continue to compete in this market. But I think some of the big global carriers we're used to dealing with have yet to really work out how they are going to do that. And so actually risk falling quite far behind quite quickly. And it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not those carriers are able to change or not. I also think that the growth in SD-WAN and the ensuing move to Internet First network architectures is actually exacerbating the challenge for the carriers. So as enterprises replace significant parts of their MPLS networks with SD-WAN powered internet circuits from likely a portfolio of internet providers, the large traditional MPLS carriers, they're seeing their relationships with their customers shrink. And so they're losing the position of kind of being the default go-to supplier for those customers' managed network services needs, not least because the perceived benefit of having your main carrier also managing the network infrastructure no longer really works if now what you're looking at is a portfolio of internet service providers rather than a single primary MPLS carrier. So it does feel a little bit to me like a perfect storm, if you will, for carrier-based managed network services right now. And I think it's going to be very interesting to watch how well they weather that storm this year and beyond, and how differently things look when they come out the other side.
Okay, thanks, Ben. This has been a good discussion. And I'm sure if we had some additional time, we could get into some of the pros and cons of the various providers of managed services. So if you'd like to learn more about managed network services deals and what suppliers might fit the bill for your needs, you can contact Ben, me, or any of our LB3 and TC2 colleagues by giving us a call or dropping us an email. You can also stay current by checking out our websites. You can follow us on LinkedIn, or you can subscribe to these Staying Connected podcasts.